Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a massive biological reset button that quite literally changed the world forever. We're going to be talking about an event that completely rewired the planet's ecosystems and laid the absolute groundwork for the modern world we live in today. Let's get right into it.
Okay, picture this. You're sitting down to a huge, delicious plate of modern Italian food, but there are absolutely zero tomatoes, no marinara, no pizza sauce. Or try to imagine the Native American Great Plains without a single horse. It feels completely wrong, right? But the crazy truth is, realities like those were literally impossible before the year 1492. Those things simply did not exist in those places.
You see, for about 250 million years, ever since the supercontinent Pangaea broke apart, the Earth's ecosystems evolved in total, complete isolation. It's like they were on different planets. The Americas had their own unique plants and animals, and the Afro-Eurasian hemisphere had its own entirely separate biological makeup. But when Christopher Columbus crossed the Atlantic, those two completely separate worlds violently collided.
You know, there's this actual 8th grade history lesson prompt that asks, what did explorers do with this new knowledge and these new items? It sounds like a super basic question, but the answer is actually our entire complex thesis for today. The resulting exchange of plants, animals, and diseases fundamentally reorganized the entire biosphere of the Earth.
Section 1. The Biological Reset.
So what exactly is this reset? Back in 1969, the historian Alfred Crosby coined a term for it. He defined the Columbian Exchange as the massive systemic transfer of plants, animals, culture, and diseases between the Americas and the Afro-Eurasian hemispheres after 1492. And Crosby pointed out something really profound. This event irrevocably diminished the variation of species from place to place. Before this, life was wildly different depending on where you stood on the globe. After this, well, everything just started to blend.
Section 2. Horses transform the Americas.
To really wrap our heads around this, let's track the unbelievable and honestly pretty ironic evolutionary journey of the horse. The earliest direct ancestors of the modern horse actually evolved right here in North America around 3.5 million years ago. But then, around 10,000 years ago, at the end of the Pleistocene epoch, they went completely extinct on the continent. Just vanished. Then, fast forward to 1493, on his second voyage, Columbus brought Spanish horses back to the Americas. They had finally returned home.
And the speed at which this changed the landscape is just staggering. Native peoples, like the Comanche, rapidly integrated these newly arrived horses into their everyday lives. By the 1700s, this adoption completely revolutionized their cultures. The horse transformed the Great Plains overnight, becoming an absolutely essential tool for hunting, travel, and warfare. It even became a primary measure of wealth and power.
To give you a sense of the sheer, massive scale of this biological explosion, listen to this observation from President Ulysses S. Grant. In his memoirs, writing about the Mexican-American War in 1846, he described a feral horse herd in Texas that was so massive, he estimated they couldn't even fit in the entire state of Rhode Island. It's wild to think about how deeply and quickly the American landscape was altered by just one single reintroduced species.
Section 3. The potato fuels the West.
Now, let's jump across the Atlantic. Before it became the ultimate global comfort food, the potato was actually this incredibly diverse and frankly dangerous plant up in the Andes Mountains. Wild potatoes are laced with toxic compounds like solanine and tomanine, but the local peoples there showed absolute ingenuity to survive these toxins. They literally mimicked wild animals and dipped their potatoes in a mixture of clay and water, which naturally neutralized the poison. They also used the freezing mountain nights and sunny days to create chuño, this freeze-dried, incredibly long-lasting potato that could sustain entire Inca armies.
But when the potato finally arrived in Europe, it was met with total, outright suspicion. Some people actually thought it caused leprosy. No joke. The philosopher Denis Diderot gave it this hilariously hesitant review. He basically noted that it was pretty tasteless and caused terrible gas, which he politely called windiness, but concluded that, hey, strong peasants probably wouldn't mind it all that much.
It actually took a French pharmacist named Antoine-Augustin Parmentier to really change Europe's mind. He essentially pulled off the ultimate PR stunt to convince a starving continent to embrace this New World crop. He hosted all potato dinners for high society, and get this, he even convinced King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette to wear potato blossoms in their hair. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the potato was highly fashionable.
And this one simple root vegetable fueled massive historical change. Seriously. Before 1750, Europe suffered from routine, devastating famines.
France alone had over 40 nationwide famines in just a 300-year span. But because potatoes grow safely underground and are incredibly productive, planting them effectively doubled Europe's entire food supply. This essentially eradicated starvation in potato-growing regions and fueled a massive population boom, which allowed European nations to assert global dominance.
Section 4. Plagues, Pests, and Plantations.
90%. Just let that number sink in for a second. It represents what's known as the Great Dying. The absolute most lethal component of the Columbian Exchange wasn't plants or animals, it was pathogens. Indigenous populations in the Americas had evolved in total isolation, meaning they had absolutely zero immunological resistance to old world diseases like smallpox, measles, and influenza. Within the first century of contact, up to 90% of the native populations perished, leading to a massive and tragic collapse of their societies.
And as those native populations collapsed, European powers realized that the climate of the Americas was absolutely perfect for growing highly profitable cash crops like sugar and tobacco. To replace the labor force that had tragically died off, they instituted the brutal transatlantic slave trade. This horrific system linked African labor, American resources, and European capital into a single, interconnected, and highly exploitative global economic engine.
And the biological dangers just kept coming, especially in agriculture. 1 million. That's another staggering number. When Europeans adopted the potato, they didn't bring over the diversity of the Andes. They mostly planted clones of a single variety. We call this industrial monoculture. And it worked great, right up until a water mold from the Americas, Phytophthora infestans, arrived in Europe in the 1840s. Because the Irish potato crops were genetically identical, the blight wiped them out almost instantly, resulting in 1 million lives lost to famine in Ireland.
This monoculture crisis essentially launched what we now call the toxic treadmill. Farmers were planting millions of identical crops. So when a New World pest called the Colorado potato beetle found these massive, totally vulnerable food sources, it attacked. Desperate farmers discovered that throwing a highly toxic, arsenic-laced paint pigment called Paris green on the plants would kill the beetles. But nature always adapts. Soon, the pests developed resistance, requiring stronger and stronger chemicals. The Columbian Exchange literally birthed the modern pesticide industry.
Section 5. The Death of Complexity.
So, what does this all mean for us today? Well, it leads to what we call the death of complexity. The Columbian Exchange completely erased those unique, localized biological zones that existed before 1492. We essentially traded highly localized, diverse ecosystems for globalized market economies, and a massive dependency on productive but incredibly vulnerable industrial monocultures and artificial fertilizers.
So I want to leave you with a bit of a provocative thought. Every single meal you eat is a product of this ongoing biological homogenization. The tomatoes, the potatoes, the beef, the wheat, they're all descendants of a massive biological collision that kicked off over 500 years ago. So when you sit down to eat tonight, what invisible global forces and massive historical collisions are sitting right there on your plate? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating explainer with me. Keep asking questions and keep looking closely at the world around you.